Hello and welcome back, Math 140 students. This is your instructor, Cindy Enrique, and we're going to continue with Chapter 7. So 7.6 is all about solving equations containing rational expressions. When we solve rational expressions, be careful when getting a solution and checking the restriction. If there is a contradiction, make sure to throw the answer out. So here, in particular, whenever we're thinking about an equation, the equation comes from having an equal sign. That's the difference between an expression and an equation. So the equation is always going to have the equal sign, okay? And unfortunately for number 1, I had a typo. I'm not perfect, mistakes happen. So let's skip number 1 and go directly into number 2. So for number 2, we're trying to solve this. So what we need to do is find the least common denominator. So the least common denominator is going to be 5x minus 3. So that is what I have to have both these fractions have this denominator. So let's look at the first fraction. So I have x over x minus 3. So this denominator is missing from the LCD a 5. So that means I'm going to multiply the numerator by a 5 as well. And I have an equal sign. Now I deal with that second fraction. I have a 2/5. I don't like the way I wrote that 5. Let me rewrite that. So 2/5. There we go. So that 5, what's missing from the LCD is the x minus the 3. So I need to multiply top and bottom by what's missing from the LCD. So now I end up having 5x over 5x minus 3 is equal to my 2x minus 3 over 5x minus 3, okay? And I can go ahead and set this further. So step number 1, if I'm thinking about my steps, was to find, step number 1 was to find the LCD. Step number 2 was to rewrite fractions to have the LCD. Step number 3 is going to be to distribute, combine numerators. So that's going to be the next step that I'm at. So step number 3, I'm going to distribute and combine my numerators. So I have the 5x over the 5x minus my 3, and that 2x here, or this 2, I'm going to multiply by distributing that 2 in the numerator. So I'm going to have 2x minus 6, and my denominator is still 5x minus 3, okay? Now that my denominators are the same, then what you can think of is I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal to get rid of the denominator. So multiply by reciprocal to cancel denominator. So here my denominator is that 5x minus 3. I'm going to have it over 1. So over on this side, I'm going to multiply this. Oops. I want to multiply it by that 5x minus 3 over 1. So when I end up doing that, the denominators cancel. So I'm left with a 5x is equal to a 2x minus 6. So for step number 5, I'm going to solve for x. So I am going to subtract 2x from both sides. So minus 2x, and I end up getting 3x is equal to a negative 6. So then from there, I'm going to divide by 3 and divide by 3, so I can get that x is equal to a negative 2. Now, step number 6 is I want to check my solution. I want to make sure that this does not give me a 0 in the denominator. So ask yourself, does answer give a denominator equal to 0? If yes, then contradiction. Okay. If I plug in -2 inside my denominator, -2 minus 3 is -5, I'm fine. So x is equal to -2 ends up becoming my final answer there. Okay, so I hope that helps. So let's go ahead and go to number 3 then. So for number 3, I see that my denominator for the first fraction is already factored. The second fraction is already factored, but the third one is not. So here I'm going to have an x minus 3 and an x plus 2. And that's how I factor. So now I know that I definitely have my LCD as an x minus 3 as an x minus 2. So I do apologize there. That should have been an x minus 2 because -3 and -2 gives me -5, and -3 times -2 is equal to a +6. So it's the same factors as the other two fractions, which is really nice. So now I'm going to multiply top and bottom by what's missing for each individual fraction. So I have this 5 and I have this x minus 3. That is what I started off with. So what is missing from that denominator, from the LCD? So we always compare the original denominator to the LCD. So it looks like the x minus 2 is missing. So I'm going to multiply everything by the x minus 2, both numerator and the denominator. The next thing I have is x, and I have x minus 2. So what I'm missing is the x minus 3 from the denominator. So x minus 3 is going to get multiplied in the numerator and the denominator. Plus, and I have x, and I have x minus 3 and x minus 2. Nothing is missing from that denominator, so I don't need it. So now I have this 5x minus 10, because I distributed the 5 inside the parentheses, over my LCD, is equal to x squared minus 3x, because I distributed the x inside the parentheses, all over my LCD, plus x over my LCD. So remember, in the previous step, it says if I were to multiply, this is what I'm reading here, if I multiply by the reciprocal, I cancel out the denominators. So the fact that I have the same denominators on all three, that means I can go ahead and drop them. It's going to cancel out. So now my answer, or the next step, I'm going to have a 5x minus 10 is equal to x squared minus 3x plus x. And that was a 3x there. Okay. So now to combine like terms, I have an x squared. Negative 3x plus 1x is a negative 2x. And I have this 5x minus 10. So that tells me I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides and add 10 to both sides. So I'm going to have 0 is equal to an x squared minus 7x plus 10. From here, what I want to do is I want to factor. Whenever I have a exponent of 2, that kind of tells me, hey, exponent of 2, you want to try to factor as much as possible. So here we go, factor. So two numbers that multiply to 10 is 5 and 2, and if they're both negative, negative 5 and negative 2 add up to negative 7. So now I have x minus 5 is equal to 0, so x is equal to a positive 5. Next I have x minus 2 is equal to 0, so x is equal to a positive 2. And let's check the answer. if I were to plug 5 inside the denominator, that checks out. I'm fine. It does not give me a 0. Ooh, but look at this. If I were to plug in a 2, so notice how this is x is equal to 2. What happens when I plug it into this? Well, if I have 2 minus 2, that gives me 0. I cannot have division by 0. So I actually throw that answer out. So the only possible answer is x is equal to 5. I had 2 possible answers, but the only answer that works is x is equal to 5. Because that 2 gives me division by 0, and dividing anything by 0 is undefined. So for problem number 4, it's the same process. I'm still looking for the LCD. So my LCD here is going to be the x plus 2. And here I have a denominator of 1. So the first fraction, x plus 4 over my x plus 2. The denominators are good, leave it alone. I have 5 over 1, so what's missing is that x plus 2, so that numerator also gets the x plus 2. And this is all equal to 6 over x plus 2. So if I want to combine and distribute my numerator, I would have an x plus 4 over my LCD minus, and here I have this 5 that's being multiplied, so 5x plus 10 over my LCD is equal to 6 over my LCD. And I just want to be careful at this next stop, the next step, I'm definitely going to be canceling out my LCDs, but I want to be careful because I have a subtraction. So remember that the subtraction also gets distributed. If there's going to be a mistake, it's usually here. So I have the x plus 4 minus the 5x minus 10 is equal to a positive 6. So when I combine like terms, I have this 1x and this negative 5x. So that's going to give me a negative 4x. I also have 4 and negative 10. So negative 10 and 4 is a negative 6 equal to 6. So I'm going to move the 6 over. So plus 6 and plus 6 since it's the opposite. So I'm going to have a negative 4x is equal to 12. So I have a negative 4x is equal to 12. So I'm going to divide both sides by that negative 4 to get the x by itself, so that x is equal to a negative 3. So you want to make sure, when I plug in negative 3 into my denominator, does it give me 0? No? Then I'm okay. So x is equal to negative 3 is a legit answer. Okay? So number 5 is really similar. I'm going to have to go ahead and factor out one of these denominators. So this is a difference of squares. So with my difference of squares, I'm going to have a p plus 5 and a p minus 5. So now I know that my LCD is going to be p plus 5 and p minus 5. So I have the plus 5 and I have the minus 5. And remember that this 2 right now has a denominator of 1. When it does not have a denominator, it defaults to have a denominator of 1. So I'm going to go ahead and work this problem out fraction by fraction. So the first fraction, I have a p minus 5 over my p plus 5. So what's missing from this denominator from the LCD is going to be the p minus the 5. So I need to multiply the top by p minus 5. Don't forget that that numerator was p minus 5. Minus 2 over 1. So what's missing here is everything. I need the p plus 5 and the p minus 5. So I need both of those. And I have plus, my next fraction, I have a p plus 15 over a p minus a 5. So that denominator is missing a p minus a 5. So I need to multiply top and bottom by that p minus 5. and all of this is equal to 50, and my denominator is p plus 5, p minus 5. So everything is there. I had the p plus 5 and p minus 5 in my original denominator, therefore I don't need to add anything to it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to FOIL this numerator. So I'm going to have a p squared minus 5p plus 5p plus 25. That gives me p squared plus 25 all over my LCD. Then I have minus, and over on this one, I have my p squared. If I FOIL as well, I'm going to have p squared minus 5p plus 5p minus 25. And it's all going to get multiplied by 2. So 2 times my p squared. What's really nice about this is that negative 5p and the positive 5p cancel out, and I have that minus 25 all over my LCD. Plus my next fraction. So that next fraction, let's see what I have here. I'm going to FOIL this as well. So when I FOIL that, I'm going to have a p squared minus 5p plus 15p, and 15 times 5 is 75. That's going to be a negative 75. So p squared, and negative 5 plus 15 is a positive 10p all over my LCD. And this is all equal to 50 over my LCD. So now that my LCDs are all the same, so the denominators are all exactly alike, now I just have to deal with my numerators. So okay, so the first one, I have my p squared plus 25. The next thing I want to do is I want to grab this negative 2 and distribute it inside my parentheses. So when I do that, I'm going to have a negative 2p squared, and negative 2 times my negative 25 is going to give me a positive 50. And for the next one, I have a p squared plus 10p minus 75, and all of that is equal to 50. So now from here, I'm just going to combine like terms. So here I actually have a highlighter, so I can actually make this a little bit easier for myself. So I have p squared minus 2p squared plus p squared. I'm just going to rewrite it. So p squared minus 2p squared plus p squared. The next thing I'm going to have are my p's. So it looks like I just have that 10p. So I'm going to have plus 10p. And it looks like the other thing that I have is that 25, 50, and negative 75. So I'm going to make sure that I write that. So plus 25 plus 50 minus 75, and all of that is still equal to 50. So when I combine like terms, 1 minus 2 plus 1 gives me 0. So when I combine like terms, the p squares cancel. So I'm left with 10p. If I have 25 plus 50 minus 75, and I add those all together, that gives me 0 as well. So that all cancels. And I have all of this is equal to 50. So then from here, what I want to do is divide by 10 and divide by 10. So then I can get what my p is going to equal to. So 50 divided by 10 gives me 5. And I want to be careful. If I were to plug 5 into the denominator, so I have this, oops, p is equal to 5. But if I were to plug this into here, what is 5 minus 5? Well, 5 minus 5 is equal to 0. So when I plug into original denominator, we get, oops, we get a 0. So division by 0 is not good. So we're actually going to say we did all of that work to find out that there is no solution. There is no solution because that 5 gives me a denominator that's equal to 0, and we don't want that. If you plug in 5 divided by 0, it gives you error on your calculator. It's undefined. You can't do that. Okay, and this is the fun part. This is where you guys are going to work out these problems. So I will work them out as well. So please press pause on your calculator, or sorry, on this whatever device you're listening on. Press pause and work out these problems. Okay guys, so hopefully you worked out these problems. I just worked them out as well. So for number 1, my LCD was 6. And so my final answer was 2. And there's no restriction in the denominator, so I am fine. For number 2 here, my denominator is 6x. So my final answer here is 3. The only restriction would be if x was equal to 0, but that wasn't a possibility, so I'm fine. X is equal to 3 is a good answer. For number 3, I worked that out, and my LCD was m minus 3, so my final answer here is going to be m is equal to 4. And for number 4, this is kind of a long one, but it's still doable. So my LCD happens to be 3x times x plus 3. So that first fraction, it has everything there. That second fraction is missing a 3x, so 3x in the bottom, 3x in the numerator. That last fraction is missing an x plus 3, so that gets multiplied in the denominator as well as the numerator. Then I combine my numerators together, I FOIL and distribute, and then the next step, I drop my denominators. Then I solve for my x, and what I ended up doing was factoring, and after I factored, I got that x is equal to 5 and x is equal to negative 2. And both of those answers are fine. For number 5, what I did is I factored, and so my LCD happens to be a plus 1, a minus 1, and a minus 3. So I multiply each fraction by what's missing in the LCD, and I combine my numerators together, FOIL, distribute, do whatever I need to do, and then I drop my LCDs, and then I combine like terms so I can get 0 on one side. I factored, and I got 2 answers. I got that a was equal to 5 and a was equal to 1, but that a is equal to 1, if I were to substitute that back into my denominator, so this, let's do this instead. This a is equal to 1, if I were to plug that back into my denominator, 1 squared minus 1, so 1 minus 1 is 0. So that would give me my denominator of 0, which I absolutely cannot have. So the only answer that I can have here is 5. 5 does not give me a 0 in the denominator. And that is it for this section. So if you guys have any questions or comments or concerns, please feel free to email me or the Math Success Center for any help. Thank you.